Hello everyone. So this is Taran here from Study Hub, and we are going to focus on your drop-down reading blanks today. They're also called reading and writing blanks. We also call them as drop-down blanks. So for those who have not done this question before, this is what the question will look like. In real exam, you will have around 5 to 6 of these questions, and they contribute score to your reading skills as well as to your writing skills. Roughly around 20 to 25 marks to your reading and roughly around 20 to 25 marks to your writing are contributed by drop-down blanks or reading and writing, fill in the blanks in reading. This is what the question will look like. You will have few blanks over there, and each blank will have that drop-down box. And in that drop-down box, you will normally have 4 options to select. You need to select the right one, the right option that will go into that blank over there. Now, these questions are mainly based on 5 scenarios. Number 1, context-based. Most of your questions will be falling in this context-based, or the second one, which we call collocation-based questions. What is context-based? When you're solving your question, you need to look at what are we talking about here. For example, if we are talking about assignment or class, you know what type of words you'll be expecting. And then let's say we are talking about Melbourne city's tourist attractions, you will be expecting certain different types of words. So in order to solve context-based, you really need to have a good understanding of what the context is. Second one is your collocations. Collocations are actually the words that feel right, the phrases that feel right, known as, because of, due to, consists of. So all these words, they are collocations. And then we have got what we call vocabulary based. Very few questions will be based on vocabulary. Then the next important one is your grammar based. And in grammar based, there are 2 types of questions. Number 1 is basic grammar, where you're looking at basic subject, verb, agreement, and past, present, future type of sentences. And second one will be advanced grammar, where you're looking at a little bit more advanced stage of the grammar part. In today's video, we are mainly going to focus on context-based and collocation-based. So before we solve the questions, I'll just quickly give you an idea how to deal or what to look for when you're looking at a context-based question. Let's look at some of these blanks here, and we have got 4 words in there. We need to select one of them. Eiffel Tower was completed in 1863, and it was built to dash that iron could be as strong as stones while being lighter. So when you're solving this, what are we looking at? We are looking at a verb here. When you're looking at a verb, you need to look at the nouns around that particular sentence. So in this case, what are we talking about? We are talking about Eiffel Tower. It over here is referring to Eiffel Tower. So Eiffel Tower was built to dash that iron could be as strong as stones while being lighter. And what are the other words? Iron, as strong as stones. So what do we need to do when you build a building to show? That word comes to your mind, right? To show that iron could be. So we are looking at a word that is similar to show. Estimate cannot go in there. Insinuate, IDC strategy, I don't care. So if the words are too difficult for you, not very familiar words, initially just ignore them. Look at the words that you're more confident with. Estimate cannot go in there because estimate will require some sort of numbers. IDC for insinuate, demonstrate and suggest. So what do we want to know? Either the answer is going to be demonstrate or suggest, because estimate and insinuate will not make sense in this context. So which one will make more sense? It was built to suggest that iron could be as strong as stones, or it was built to demonstrate that iron could be as. So when you're building something, you're actually trying to show something. Therefore, the answer in this case will be demonstrate. This one here. Let's go to the next one. After sealing the deal, on fine day, he sat back on the lounge calmly with the sense of dash. What are we looking at? We are looking at nouns: happiness, ecstasy, satisfaction, grief. And when you're looking at the nouns, you need to look for the verbs, adverbs, adjectives in that particular sentence. So after sealing the deal, on fine day, he sat on the lounge calmly with a sense of something. So if you only solve this question by looking at sense of happiness, sense of ecstasy, sense of satisfaction, sense of grief, everything will make sense. So in order to get the right answer, you need to look at the context, because only one of that is right. So when you sit down calmly, that calmness is a sign of satisfaction. So therefore answer will be sense of satisfaction. Next one. The plight of Sri Lanka during the floods need resurrection because the dash waters will cause a serious threat. Now in this case, I'm going to eliminate relenting. I'm also going to eliminate improving, because we are looking, the context over here is negative. So we can say increasing waters, or we can say rising waters. Now look at again, you're looking at a verb or adjective. What type of word you will need in here? You're talking about floods. What happens during the floods to water levels? Water level will rise. Water level will rise. That activity is called rising. Increasing is when you blow a balloon, the size of the balloon is increasing. Increasing is pretty much every side. In this case, floods, what happens in the floods? The water level will go up, rising. So answer will be rising water levels. Let's now look at the questions based on collocations. So the rising sea levels coupled with storm surges could put large parts of vegetation and population under dash of severe flooding. A very common thing that you need to keep in mind or keep your eye on will be, if you see a preposition after the blanks, you are going to select a word that is mostly used with of. So if we look at this one here, under danger of severe floods, under threat of severe floods, under warning of severe floods, or under intimidation of severe. So this doesn't make sense. Warning does not go with of. Right? We don't say warning of severe floods. So either we can go, so these two words will not make sense. So either we can go with danger or threat. Now what is the word that is used with of? Danger of, threat of, well, pretty much everything. So sometimes look at the preposition before the blank as well. What do we say? Do we say under danger or do we say in danger? Do we say under risk or do we say in risk, at risk? So in this case, if we look at that context, we are looking at the word that goes with under and under threat. So the answer will be under threat here. So you also need to look at that whole phrase, which one will make sense. Under danger of severe floods or under threat of severe floods? Under threat of severe flooding. The indiscriminate killing will put these species in dash of extinction. So here we are looking at collocation in dash of. So obviously answer will be, so with risk we say at risk of, under threat of, in danger of. So answer in this case will be in danger. Got it? Now let's try to apply this logic and try to solve some questions in your reading, writing, fill in the blanks. This is your first question. The desire to build big is nothing new. Big buildings have been used to show off power and wealth, to honor leaders or religious beliefs, to stretch the limits of what's possible, and even as simple dash among owners, families, architects, and builders. And even as simple dash antagonists, understandings, ideas, and competition. So now simple ideas, simple understandings, simple competition, antagonists will be using IDC over there. So everything makes sense. We can say simple understandings, we can say simple ideas, we can say simple competition. Do not try to solve this question by looking at the words before and after the blank. You need to look at the word around that particular blank. So here we are looking at a noun. So we'll have to look for the other words in there. So big buildings have been used to show off power and wealth. So we are trying to show off power and wealth, to honor leaders or religious beliefs, to stretch the limits of what's possible, and even as simple dash among. So this is going to help you here. Owners, families, architects, and builders. So what can you have among owners, families, architects? Can we have understandings among owners, ideas among owners, or competition among owners? Pretty much everything makes sense. So we have to then look at the context. Showing off power and wealth. They are honoring someone, doing something. They are stretching the limits. Who could be the best? So therefore, more appropriate word will be as simple competitions among owners, families, architects, and builders. Some of the most buildings of the past include the pyramids in Egypt, the skinny towers stretching towards the sky in Italian hill towns, and the Gothic cathedrals of Europe. So some of the most dash buildings. We are looking at an adjective here: drastic, dramatic, theatrical, and natural. First of all, I'm going to eliminate because the tone is positive, so we are not going to go with drastic. And these buildings are not natural buildings. They are not naturally made. They are man-made. So we can either say dramatic or we can say theatrical. Now in this context, dramatic will be more appropriate word when it comes to buildings. Buildings can be iconic, buildings can be dramatic. Theatrical is more about stage and theaters. That doesn't go well with buildings. So elimination is also a very good technique to use here. Try to eliminate whatever words you can eliminate, maybe one, maybe two. While these types of buildings may look very different from each other, they all have one thing in dash, all have one thing in common. So this is a collocation. Also, when you look at that conjunction there, while these buildings may look very different from each other, while can be used for comparison or contradiction. So the sentence with while says may look very different from each other. Next one should be, because it's contradiction or comparison, they are similar. So therefore, in this case, two reasons we are going to go with in common. One, it's a very popular collocation, in common. So sometimes you don't even have to look at the context. The collocation is so powerful that it will just help you. They all have one thing in common. From my point of view, it's a collocation. You don't even have to look at the context. Point of view is a very common and very powerful collocation. Now, once you get that answer, I don't recommend you reading all this part here. We are going to straight go to the next blank. We will only read those sentences if we are not able to solve this by paying attention to this sentence or context, this sentence. Otherwise, please don't waste your time reading this. Similarly, let's say once I get this answer here, am I going to read this whole thing here? Wastage of time. It doesn't make any sense, right? We don't need to solve any question now. So similarly, don't read those sentences there. We'll straight away go to the next one. To dash in the 19th century paved the way for a whole new type of building, the skyscraper. To dash in the 19th century paved the way for a whole new type of building, the skyscraper. So we are talking about buildings here. So in this case, when it comes to buildings, more appropriate word will be to developments in the 19th century, right? Development of the buildings. And skyscraper gives you context that we are talking about buildings. Therefore, the more appropriate word for buildings will be skyscraper. The first was the development. Another reason we should go for development of a safe elevator. Primitive elevators of various designs had been used for centuries, and starting in the mid-19th century, steam operated elevators were used to move materials in factories, mines, and warehouses. But these elevators were not. So but over there is giving you an indication that there is a problem coming in now. Next sentence should be contradicting to what you have in the beginning. But these elevators were not dash safe for people, Measurably, only, considered, perceptively. But now there has to be a problem. What do they say? Safe elevators. Now they were not safe for people. So in this case, these elevators were not measurably safe, only safe, considered safe, or perceptibly safe. So these two words will eliminate. We can say measurably safe when we measure it in comparison to something, or we can say considered safe. In this context, the answer will be these elevators were not considered safe for people. If the cable broke, they would plummet to the bottom of the elevator shaft. So the answers are competition, dramatic, common, developments, and considered. Right? Let's have a look at the next question. Next one, if after years of Spanish classes, some people still find it impossible to understand some native speakers, they should not worry. This does not dash mean the lessons were wasted. Now look at this here. Even if you don't have that blank there, the sentence is still complete. This does not mean the lessons were wasted. This does not mean the lessons were wasted. So in such scenarios, when the sentence itself is complete, we are mainly looking at what goes with the verbs And in this case, we are looking at an adverb. So you're expecting an ly word before even you click on the drop-down list. So necessarily, usually, only, particularly. So in this case, only will not make sense. It can be this does not necessarily mean the lessons were wasted. This does not usually mean the lessons were wasted. This does not particularly mean the lessons were. Now we cannot go with usually here as well. Right? That means in some cases this does not mean, in other cases it may mean that the lessons were wasted. But in this case, we are more of the opinion that it is inevitable. It is 100% sure that you're not wasted your time. So it can be necessarily or particularly. The answer in this context will be necessarily. Particularly is used when we are talking about in specific scenario, specifically, right? I was able to do all the tasks, particularly the first one. So we are talking specifically about one part. In this case, we are more talking about inevitable thing. So it is not necessary that you have wasted your lessons. And of course, I am not going to read that for the same reason. The most common Spanish dialect taught in the US is Standard Latin American. It is sometimes called Highland Spanish since it is generally spoken in the dash areas of Latin America. So if you try to solve this question by just looking at this context here, we can say rocky areas, we can say hidden areas, we can say mountainous areas, we can say coastal areas. So in order to find out the actual answer, you will have to look at the context, the other words being used here. Number one, we are talking about language. It is, that means this type of language is sometimes called Highland Spanish, since it is generally spoken in the dash areas of sins. So it is called Highland for a reason. Why? Since it is spoken in higher areas of Latin America. So therefore, in this case, answer will be mountainous areas. But now if I change this to beachy areas or sandy areas, maybe the word will change. Now we cannot say mountainous, we can say desert areas, or we can say coastal areas, right? Because beach is related to coast. Sand is related to deserts. So your answer will depend on what word goes in there. The moment you change that word, your answer will change. Next one. While each country retains its own dash and has some unique vocabulary, residents of countries such as Mexico, Colombia, Peru, and Bolivia generally speak Latin American Spanish, especially in urban centers. So here we are looking at thoughts, accents, inflections, and authority. Now look at the context. The context is we are talking about a language. And here further they talk about vocabulary, right? They're talking about Latin American Spanish. So we are more talking about the language and vocabulary. Therefore, we are going to go with accents here because the context is about a language. More appropriate word will be accents. This dialect is noted for its dash of each letter and its strong R sounds, pronunciation, collection, remembering, and elucidation, IDC, remembering, collection, and pronunciation. Now, if you again look at the context, it's about language. And in that context, we're talking about dialect. We are talking about strong R sounds. So therefore, the appropriate answer will be pronunciation. However, the Spanish of Madrid and of northern Spain, called Castilian, developed something that never reached the New World. These include the pronunciation of C and say as the. In Madrid, gracias, thank you, becomes gracias as opposed to gracias in Latin America. So it developed something. It developed problems, maybe characteristics, maybe normalities, maybe distinguishes, does not make sense. So out of problems, characteristics, and normalities, something has to be there. Most likely answer is going to be problems or characteristics because language can develop a problem. Language can have some sort of characteristics. Now look at the next one here. Is it talking about a problem or is it talking about a type of character? Now if you read this one here, it is talking about a character, that some words are spoken in this way. No problem here. Therefore, answer will be characteristics. Right. So this is how we will be solving these blanks. Now, in order to keep enjoying these classes, keep enjoying more of these classes, please make sure that you are liking the video, subscribe to the channel, click on the subscribe button. I will be posting more videos every now and then. Also, feel free to let me know if you want to see any particular or if you want to cover any particular type of question. I will be happy to help. Now, let's do one more question, and this will be about collocations. Look at this question. Arbitration is a method of conflict resolution which, with more or less formalized mechanisms, occurs in many political and legal spheres. there are two main dash to arbitration. So we are looking at, as soon as you see that, always make sure you straight away click or focus on your preposition. There are two main dash to arbitration. The first is that it is a voluntary process under which two parties in conflict agree between themselves. So further on, they're sort of talking about understanding or definition or sort of those things. So there are two main, cannot say endorsements. There can be two main categories, two main characteristics, or two main definitions. Now with two, the word that can go with two here will be two main characteristics to arbitration. Definitions of, categories of, characteristics, we can say characteristics to arbitration. That means arbitration has two characters. The first is that it is a voluntary process under which two parties in conflict agree between themselves to be dashed by the judgment of a third party. To be dashed by the judgment. Agreed by the judgment, bound by the judgment, convicted or relieved. So convicted will not go in there. Doesn't make sense in the judgment context or in this context. And relieved is also very generic word in here. So we can say agreed because we are talking about the judgment. You can agree, or bound, or judgment can be binding. The answer in this context will be bound because there is a collocation binding by the judgment. Judgment is binding. Of a third party which has no other authority over them, the judgment, however, is not legally binding. So another reason why we are going for the word bound there. Sometimes, not always, sometimes the passage itself will give you some indications which word will go in there. The second is that there is usually no clear body of dash or set of rules. So this is what we call apples with apples logic, or set of rules. So or is a word that is used to show you two options. He or she, Melbourne or Sydney. So that means both the things are similar. So in this case, set of rules, next word that we are looking at should be close to set of rules. So laws, rulings, decrees or decisions, which one is more close to set of rules? Body of laws, right? Body of laws. That the arbitrator is free dash to any prior, again, collocation too. Now we are looking at the word, for example, to any. We don't say, for example, to any. We say, for example, any prior agreement. For example, is not followed by to. Subject to any, maybe. Restricted to any, we don't say restricted to, we say restricted by. Victim of. So the right appropriate word will be subject to any prior agreement with the conflicting parties to decide on whether basis of justice is deemed something. Is deemed, something is deemed proper, suitable, unfair, available. Unfair will not go in there because we are talking in a positive scenario here. So it can be justice is deemed available, justice is deemed proper, justice is deemed suitable. Answer in this case, this case is justice is appropriate. So therefore we'll be saying justice is deemed suitable. I really hope you enjoyed that video. I will be doing more videos every now and then. Please like the videos and subscribe to the channel. They will be very, very helpful videos. Thank you very much. All the very best. God bless you all.